Hi everyone and welcome to Blackwood Engage Layout. So it's been about 2 months since I posted an update. I've been exceptionally busy both at work and obviously on the layout building the second Helix. So the last video that I posted showed the completion of basically the lower fiddle yard, and obviously trains could access that lower fiddle yard from the first Helix. Since then I've had to build a new lift-out bridge which takes me over to a new table baseboard where the second Helix now sits. I did post a very short video a short time ago which did show a train going up this second Helix. Obviously it's now built, and obviously building all these extra bits of baseboard and building the second Helix, that has taken up a considerable amount of time. So what we will do first of all is I'll take you and I'll show you the first of the new baseboards and explain what I did to build the lift out section. So let's go and take a look at that. Right, I've actually removed the lift out section. So what you're looking at here is where the baseboards ended after all the baseboard building that I did during the late spring and summer months. So if I come round here and apologise, I need to apologise to you in advance because obviously this is all underneath the layout. So there are the existing baseboards that I built. So there's the corner baseboard, and then we've got the main baseboard along there. Linking baseboard goes back to the table that takes the first Helix. So that's where I was in my baseboard building. So if I come back round this way, and you can see I then had to design something that would come from the end of that baseboard there and would come all the way over here to this new table baseboard, which obviously takes Helix number 2. And as you can see, it's not in line. So the entrance track is here, and the other baseboard is diagonally opposite it. So it's actually a kind of diagonal baseboard on a slight S bend. So if I come back, you can see there is the actual lift out baseboard. Only carries 2 tracks, and there are a set of crossovers on it which will allow me to switch trains to any of the 9 lower fiddle yard tracks. The baseboard is made out of 9mm plywood. It's a single piece of plywood which I simply had to shape. Obviously because of its length it was quite springy, and what I have done, if I turn this over, is I have in actual fact managed to put in a curved spine to it. Now that is one piece of wood that runs all the way up the middle. The way that was done was I cut through the wood, not right through, but took it out enough that I could actually bend the wood, and the wood was bent in place, it was glued and it was clamped. Once it was all dry, where I had taken the wood out, I simply filled it in with wood filler, which was then sanded to make it an absolutely strong central spine. As you can also see, I've used, rather than D connectors, I'm using these male and female connectors. I've only used them a couple of times in the layout, but that's what's connecting the actual track. And I've also put, because it is quite narrow, I also put this 1.5mm, if you like, parapet onto it, which means it sits absolutely, when you take it out, it sits on the ground. Any point motors, because there will be point motors on here, any point motors won't be damaged. And it also means that it acts as a slight guardrail just in case there's any derailments. Okay, so I've put the lift out section back in, and what we're looking at is the rail alignment system that I've used for the lift out section. Now, I've used something called ProTrack, which is manufactured by a company called Model Tech, and these are essentially they're a 2-bit piece of kit. There's no track actually on them. They come with essentially 4 sleepers on each section, and on the top of the sleepers there are brass contact strips, and the track is simply soldered to the contact strips. Now, what makes this rail alignment system different is that where the 2 tracks join, the easiest way to describe the plastic part of the track at that point is a bit like a jigsaw. They are specially cut out sections so that when you align the 2 pieces of track together, there's only one way in which the sections will align because of the jigsaw pattern, and that ensures that your actual rails are then aligned. Now, on the instructions that come with it, it shows how you fit one of these joiners onto a piece of set track straight, and they show you removing essentially the last 3 or 4 sleepers to leave just the 2 rails sticking out, and then you use which something I've never used before. It's solder paste, and you put a very small bead of solder paste on top of the brass contact strips under either rail, and then you simply apply heat to the rail, and within literally a second the grey paste simply turns to liquid solder, and of course when you remove the soldering iron it solidifies, and your track is then firmly fixed to the brass contact strips. Now, in my particular case, if I come out a little bit, if I zoom out, now you'll see here that the track actually comes off a curve. It goes a very short straight section and then it goes into another curve. Now, what I did here was I actually used flexible track, and I laid the flexible track just as you would normally lay flexible track. It was laid over the joint, and then I drew pencil marks so I knew exactly what the curvature of the track was. I then lifted the flexible track and I removed each rail from the plastic sleeper webbing, and then I very, very gently bent it into the shape that was basically drawn onto the top of the baseboard. Probably took me 10 minutes to do each rail, and once the rail was actually sitting in the shape that was drawn on the baseboard, I then threaded it back onto the wooden sleepered web. That meant that when I then laid the bit of flexible track back down loosely, it was sitting in the shape that you actually see it there. So it started off from, if I come right around there, there's actually a point there, and then it's essentially that's around about a 4th radius curve, and then it goes into a slightly sharper 3rd radius curve just before it becomes straight, and then again it goes straight onto what would be the equivalent of a 3rd radius curve on the inside there. Once I had done that, I fixed the ProTrack rail joiners, obviously at the baseboard joint, and then what I did was I removed 8 sleepers from the actual flexible track section, and I then laid that on the flexible track down with obviously the bare rails then sitting right above the brass contact strips of the ProTrack rail joiner. And obviously once that I was happy with that, I lifted it off, put a very, very small bead of solder paste on. It comes in you can buy it off, I got it out of, I think it was off of Amazon. It's not all that expensive, and it comes actually with a very small syringe with a very, very fine tip applicator, and you really don't need a lot. I probably, the join that you're looking at was my very first attempt, and I probably put too much solder onto it, which is not a bad thing. It's not a scenic section, so it's not the best of solder or soldering attempts, let's put it that way. But as I say, it's not a scenic section, and the main thing is it keeps the track in the right position. So as I say, I put a very, very small bead of solder paste on, and then laid properly the flexible track, pinned it all down. It sits obviously in this section, it's sitting on cork underlay. And once that was all done, I then obviously applied some heat. The solder paste, literally within a few seconds, or within a second, less than a second, it turns to liquid solder. And that's fine. The track is in absolutely rock solid, it will not move. And then what I did was I just took a fine tooth hacksaw, and I then sawed through the actual two rails where obviously the join is not in the baseboard join, because one on the instructions you actually overlap one of the joiners. So one of the joiners actually just sits over from one baseboard over to the other one. And once that was done, I obviously I've used connectors. Obviously I showed you the connectors in the previous clip. I obviously tested it and it's worked absolutely fine. And the same principle was used at the other end of the baseboard, again with two pairs of Pro-Track rail connectors. So they cost around, I think it's £10 for N-gauge. I'm not sure, they're probably about the same price for 00HO. I think they also do O-gauge, etc. But I would actually recommend these. I've found that these have been really good in terms of aligning the track. As I say, I've also put in, just as again belts and braces, I've also put in some small track pins just at the side, just to make sure, doubly make sure that the rails always align. And I've also on the actual baseboard itself, at either end, I've got a couple of screws, simply just to make sure that I don't accidentally hit the baseboard if I'm crawling about underneath, and maybe damage one of the rail joiners. But that's the way in which the lift out section was joined into the rest of the lower fiddle yard baseboards, and obviously going out of the lower fiddle yard onto the table baseboard and then up onto the Helix. So this is Helix number 2. I would say that it's built better than Helix number 1, in so much as the gaps between each of the levels is absolutely exactly the same. There is a 36mm gap between each level, and when I reached the top of the Helix, I was only 2mm short of the main baseboard. So as I say, the first Helix, when it was built, it's got ever decreasing heights as you go up the Helix. The heights at the bottom are around about 38mm, but when you get to the top, they're down to about 34. Whereas this Helix has a very steady rise of 36mm between each level. I've obviously got the Helix from the same manufacturer, and of course when I built the first Helix I did have some issues with the actual kit. I have to say I did have the same issues with this kit as I had with the first one. The only difference was I knew how to deal with all the issues. So this kit didn't take me as long to build. It probably took me around 3 weeks, whereas the other kit I think took me about 5 to 6 weeks to actually construct it. It is all glued together, although each board is a separate entity. The boards are all physically glued with wood glue, so you could actually pick the entire Helix up in a winner. In terms of what can go up it, Helix number 1, I did load testing on it and it was able to take up a class 66 with 9 intermodal wagons on it. I've done the same load test on this, and again this Helix here can also take up the same length of train. In reality, I don't think I would have any bigger train running in the layout. A class 66 and 9 intermodals is a very, very long train, and even an N gauge. And when it comes on to off the actual outer circuit and comes on to the main layout, the main layout can just about take it and no more. It doesn't look too ridiculous, principally because you can take it back off the main layout and obviously back onto this new outer circuit, and obviously the 2 helixes. So yeah, so I don't have any. I mean, would I recommend this manufacturer? If you're really good at woodcraft, then yeah, for what you pay, it's pretty good. But if you're not good at woodcraft, you're not good at DIY, then I wouldn't recommend purchasing this Helix from this particular manufacturer, because I think you'd probably end up throwing it in the bin. I did obviously in the first Helix have to persevere quite a bit to get it to work, and it does work, and obviously this Helix here also works fine as well. In terms of how long does it take a train to do a complete circuit, well, I've actually timed some locomotives, and rough terms, the quickest that a train can go down one helix, up the other helix, up through the bottom fiddle yard, and then through the what will be the new scenic section, we're talking about the quickest a train can do is about 2 minutes 45 seconds. Slower trains are taking around about 3 minutes 10 seconds. So once that Helix was completed, I then had to turn my attention to joining onto the main baseboards, and that involved me doing some extension work, and we'll now just look at what that extension work involved. So to integrate the second Helix into the existing layout, I've had to build 3 new baseboards. Well, not really new baseboards, they're extensions to the existing baseboard. The first baseboard is obviously the first grey one, which runs from where you see the inside Helix track just ends, and you'll see the grey board starts. So that runs across to where the point is actually sitting at the moment, and you can see I've put a threaded rod on the left hand side there. It runs right the way down to the table baseboard, so that supports on that side. On the other side, I didn't need a threaded rod because it sits against the outer edge of the baseboard framing, so I've been able to actually fix a small piece of wood on that, and the baseboard is able to rest on that. So the baseboard there, the linking baseboard, isn't going anywhere. Then the next baseboard is the one that's attached now to the front main baseboard of the layout. So this is 150 mils or 6 inches in old money, and that has been simply added on with supporting pillars which have been glued and screwed to the main frame of the existing baseboards, so it's not going anywhere. And obviously once that baseboard was done, if I come back, just use the camera work, just where the craft knife is sitting, there is a small curved baseboard, triangular baseboard, which actually just brings you back on to the existing baseboard layouts that we already actually had. And then you can obviously see there's the existing track work that I had put up when I built in Helix number 1. So there's Helix number 1 sitting in the back corner, and then as we pan round you can see the main layout, and in the diagonally opposite corner we have Helix number 2. So that's all the work that I have actually been doing over the past 2 months, is building these baseboards. Then obviously a good chunk of it was taken up in building the actual Helix, and now I've started to lay in the track. So at the moment there is only one track connected up. That's the inside track there, so I can obviously run trains all the way around the new outer circuit. There will be another, obviously a second track beside it, which will connect up to the inside track on the Helix. And obviously, as you can see, there is a point there because there is going to be a passing loop which will run from where that point is. It'll come all the way along that front baseboard, and if I come all the way around here, you should see there's the point at the other end, just there. Oops, if I miss it. So it's going to run from there all the way back. So that is a very, very long loop. It's that length because that is the length of a class 66 and 9 intermodal wagons. So there was no point in me putting a passing loop in if I couldn't accommodate the biggest of all the trains that are actually going to run on the layout. So that now, just to actually say, this class 66 is not operating in full power. I'm actually taking this only up with the controller at just a fraction over 50% of the power. Normally when I run this train up, or when I was doing all the testing in the Helix, it ran at full power, but I thought let's do a little test at half power and see if it's able to pull 9 intermodal wagons. The last 2 don't have any boxes on, but it's still 16 boxes, and it is a huge length of a train. As you can see, as it's going round the Helix, the class 66 is actually overlapping the back of the train, and as we go on to level 5, it's not slipping. It's pulling up at a very, very steady rate, and that's us now on to level 6. Now I actually have a train sitting at the top on an isolated section, so when this train comes up off the top of the Helix, it will actually stop dead because there is another train in front of it, but it should actually show that it can, even at half power, it can get up this Helix. And here we are, top level, just coming round, and it now runs off the Helix, and it will just stop in a minute dead. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavour as to what I've actually been doing on the layout. Chances are we're only probably less than 3 weeks now to Christmas Day by the time you're probably watching this video update. So my next video update will probably be almost certainly it will be in the new year. So from myself, I'd like to wish all of you a very merry and happy Christmas and a prosperous new year when it comes, and to all the subscribers, a big thanks to you. I'm very, very close to actually almost having 1,500 subscribers, which is something I never thought that I would actually get anywhere near. So maybe hopefully maybe in the new year I'll actually pass that 1500 mark. So that's all from me just now, and I will catch all you guys really soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.